Hello Kadivas and welcome back to another tutorial. It's been a hot minute since I actually did a tutorial on the channel, and in this video I am going to be taking you guys through the process of creating the sewing patterns for this asymmetric gathered off shoulder dress. I saw this dress, I fell in love, I knew I wanted to try it out. So if you'd like to see how they make the sewing patterns, make sure to keep on watching all the way till the end. This is a two-part project, so in the second video I'm going to be showing you how to cut and stitch the dress together and all that good stuff. So if you are not subscribed to the channel already, you definitely want to, so you don't miss when that video goes live. With that out of the way, let's get straight into this video. I'm excited for this project because I love dresses that have a very clever twist on simple silhouettes. Like, it's an A-line dress, it's an off-shoulder dress, but the ruching and the gathering around the front just makes the dress a lot more fashion forward. So if you'd like to see how I made the sewing patterns, make sure to keep on watching. Do give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and let's get straight into the video. For this project, I'm going to be working with three main patterns. The first is my basic bodice, which is going to help me save a lot of time. This I'm going to be linking on the screen and down below for anyone who doesn't have one yet. I'm also going to be working from my basic sleeve pattern because the dress actually has sleeves. In addition to those basic blocks, I just wrote and took down these measurements so I have a guidance or reference point as I created this pattern. Starting off with the front dress, which is where a lot of the work is, I have a large piece of paper that I have folded, and the folded edge is along the center front edge. And I'm essentially just tracing off the size that is 2 sizes smaller than me because this dress is going to be made with a stretch fabric, so I want a lot of negative ease. So after tracing off all of the essential lines like the bust, the waist, the hip, the side seam, the shoulder and neckline, I'm marking my desired dress length. Mine is 45 inches because I want it to be just around where my ankle hits. I'm squaring this across, that is drawing in the dress hemline, and my hemline width is 14 inches because I want the dress to be an A-line silhouette that flares out from my hips. Next up, I'm going to be drawing in the side seam that connects the hip to the hem of the dress. Because I already have the bodice already traced off, it saved me a lot of time around that portion of creating the pattern. So I essentially just opened up my pattern and I mirrored the same lines on the other side, which is why I started off doing it on a fold because I want a full front of the dress. And I'm going in to mark 2 inches above the bust line and draw in a V-shaped neckline, which is like the basis of this design process. After drawing in that V-shaped neckline, the next thing I'm going to do is essentially think about how I'm going to divide the front of the dress into two. Now it has a line that cuts somewhat through the middle and then goes back to the hip, and whenever I have lines like this, I like to do them by hand because it gives me freedom to place points where I want to place them. So after doing it by hand, I'm connecting those points together with the curved side of my pattern master. You can do this straight with your pattern master or your French curve if you know how to like bend the ruler in a way that it creates the line that you want. But so both sides connect correctly, I'm just adding a notch that connects the left side to the right side of the front. Now I'm going to trace off this smaller portion here. That side doesn't really have a lot of changes or like details attached to it. I simplified it compared to the inspiration dress, but the other side is where there's going to be a lot of slashing and spreading happening. So once I'm done tracing off the main line, I'm going to go ahead and transfer the notches, add seam allowance, and then cut out the pattern ready to be used. This is the first of 4 patterns I'm going to be creating in this tutorial. In the second follow-up video, I'm going to be sharing how to use the patterns to cut and stitch the dress. Now moving on to the other side of the front pattern, I am going ahead to extend the shoulder upwards to include the back bodice. Now I'm just sliding the back bodice pattern underneath like so, matching the shoulder edge of the smallest size of this pattern, which is a size 6. I'm matching them in such a way that I can continue drawing off the back arm curve, as well as just drawing a little bit of the side, because I want that to be one continuous piece. The back neckline is V-shaped and it ends along or at the point where the upper chest line is. Now I'm marking 1/2 inch below that upper chest line, and I'm going to be marking 1/2 inch on the other side as well, so I have a straight edge on this portion of the back extension. Now that's the first change we're going to be making to this side of the front dress pattern, and I'm going in to add a seam allowance around before making any changes, because this pattern we're going to be just switching up a bit to add details that this dress design has. So I'm adding the seam allowance around the side seam, around the front edge where the other side connects to this side I'm currently working on, and then I'm going to be drawing in a hemline. Now because it's an A-line silhouette, I folded up the hemline upwards like this, so I have the right shape along the sides. That's very important when it's time for me to actually stitch this up. And the hem allowance is about 1 inch. You can add as much or as little as you like. This I am drawing across like so, and once I have it drawn in place, I'm going to go ahead to cut out this other side of my front dress pattern, ready to be changed, ready to be adapted to add all of the ruching and the gathering that the dress has on that side of it. Now this is what it looks like so far. So far so good. I'm going to be starting from the top and kind of work my way down to the side or the bottom area, so it's easy to follow along if you're recreating this pattern for yourself. Starting from the top gathering point, I'm going to work my way on that side. So I'm coming to where the bust line is, and I'm marking 0.75 inches above, and then marking another 0.5 inch above that first point. And then I'm going to be drawing slanted lines that go into the arm curve. These lines I'm going to be slashing and spreading, so that allows me to add the gathers along that portion of the dress. Just know that the more you slash that, the more gatherings it would have. Now along this shoulder seam area, I am marking 1.5 inches below the shoulder seam and then 1.5 inch above the shoulder seam. Next up, I'm going to be going to that 1.5 inch mark and marking another 1.5 inch distance or panel width, and these I'm going to be slashing and spreading, so that allows that part of the dress to fall and create the off shoulder effect that it has. So I'm slashing from the inside outwards towards where the arm curve is, because I'm adding the volume on the inner section rather than on the outer section. So I'm going to be starting from the bust area that I slashed first, and that I am going to be spreading by about 1 inch or 0.75 inch. I don't want the gathering there to be a lot, but if you want yours to be really full and gathered, you know you can add more volume there. So once I had spread the panels there by 0.75 inches, I'm going to move my way to the top section that I slashed as well. And this I'm actually going to be spreading by slightly more compared to the first set of panels that I slashed around the bust area. I'm going to be spreading these by 1.25 inches, so there is enough volume to create the off-shoulder drapey effect that the dress has on that side. I want it to really fall off my shoulder so it's visible and it's clear. Once I was done slashing all of them, I know it's time for me to go in and essentially connect the panels together, so we have like an even line or an even curve that connects the very top to the very edge. So using the curved side of my pattern master, I'm drawing a curved line that connects all of the slashed panels for that top area where the shoulder seam is, and then on this side around the bust area, I'm essentially just using a straight line to connect them in place. I'm going to cut out any excess paper that I don't want and move on to the next area that I'll be needing to slash for this dress. now that I'm done with this first portion or area of slashing and spreading, I'm going to be moving on to the section around the waist. For this side, I'm going to be starting by marking 1 inch below the waistline and then marking 1.5 inch wide panels. This I'm going to repeat a couple of times. I'm going to repeat it 4 times, so I end up having 4 panels that are going to be slashed and spread along the waist area. This I'm going to be drawing or connecting to the side with slanted lines because that is kind of how I want the gathering or the draping to fall. Once I'm done drawing in the lines like so, I'm going to be moving on to the last portion, which is around the hip, and mark the points that I need to slash and spread around there as well. The final section I'm going to be slashing and spreading is the portion around the hips on this side of the dress. And for this, I'm going to be coming to the side seam and marking 1 inch away from the side seam like so. And from that 1 inch point, mark 1.25 along the curve of that section. And this I repeated 4 times. So I'm essentially going to be drawing in vertical lines that go from the hem all the way to those marked points until I have all of them drawn in place, because for this side I'm going to be spreading it horizontally compared to the previous section that I kind of spread upwards or vertically. After drawing in this particular vertical line, I went in towards the middle portion and added an additional panel, so I ended up with 6 panels for this side of the dress. These I'm going to be cutting entirely, so they're going to be separate individual panels, so that allows me to add all of the volume that I need. For the waist area, I'm going to be slashing from the inner side towards the side seam like so, slashing as close as possible to the edge of the paper, and then after doing that, I'm going to slash and spread the hip area. For this waist portion, I am spreading it in a somewhat vertical slanted or like vertical outside direction, and I'm spreading them by 1.5 inches because I want the erosion to be very obvious around that portion of the dress. I am just taping down the panels as I am spreading them across like so. It's essential to have some kind of paper underneath so that keeps the slashed panels intact. If you want to have one smooth pattern, you can essentially just draw around the pattern when you're done and then discard this your slashed version on top. But I like to keep both so that gives me an idea of how much that I added. Once I was done slashing all of them, I connected the panels together so I have a smooth seam along this side of the front of the dress, and I'm just cutting away the excess paper that I don't need on the inner and on the outer side of this front edge. So once I'm done doing so, I'm going to move on to the hip portion and I'm slashing entirely, so I have separate panels that I'm going to be spreading. I layered some paper underneath and I'm going to be spreading them sort of like sideways like I'm doing here, and I'm just moving them to see how much of the paper that I need before going ahead to start measuring and taping things down. Once I was done doing that, I just taped down the first main pattern towards the top of the screen, and then I'm going to be spreading by 1.5 inches because I want this side to be really nice and lush with a lot of gathering along that section of the seam. I am going to repeat this for all of the panels, and yes, this front pattern has a lot of work, but if it's done right, it just adds a really nice flavor to the dress. So I'm going in here to connect the panels along the hemline and along the waistline like so. So I have a smooth edge or a smooth seam on both sides when I actually use this pattern to cut my desired fabric. So once I was done drawing in those lines, I'm going to shave off any excess paper that I don't need along this top edge like I'm doing, along the hemline and along the side seam as well. So these are the two main front patterns. You have the simpler one to the left and then the one that has a lot of slashing and spreading to the right, because that would need to be gathered into the straighter, more simpler panel on the left side of the screen But my plan is to actually use the same pattern to cut the outer and the lining. So I'm going to be cutting 2 pieces for each of the front pattern. But once these are done, I'm going to move ahead to work on the back dress pattern, which is not as complicated, thankfully, because all the drama is in the front. So I have my back bodice pattern here, and this I'm going to be tracing off in a similar manner as I did for the front. I have a large piece of paper that I have folded, and the folded edge I have matched to the center back edge. So I'm tracing off 2 sizes smaller than my actual size. In this case is a size 6, and I'm just tracing off the shoulder, the arm curve, the side seam, on all of the important points like the bust, waist, and hip. And once I have this, I'm going to be transferring the lines to the other side. But first off, I'm going to mark my desired dress length, which is 45 inches. Once I have that marked, I'm going to be squaring the point across so I have a clear hemline to work with, and the width of my dress hemline is 14 inches. This, once I'm done marking along the horizontal line that I just drew earlier on, I'm going to be connecting to the hip point or the hip area of my dress. Once I'm done doing that, I reflected or copied the lines on the other side of the paper so I have a full back pattern piece to work with. Coming to this side of the back dress pattern, I'm going to be marking 1 inch below, and that I'm going to be connecting to the opposite side to create my back neckline. This I'm drawing as a scoop V-shaped neckline, and then I'm going to be drawing in or drawing across the 1 inch mark and connecting it back to the swoop. So I have a 1 shoulder neckline on the back, because remember we extended the front, so that has taken away that portion of the back of the dress. In here, I'm just going ahead to add a 1 centimeter seam allowance around my pattern. I'm using a different color of pen so you guys can clearly tell what line is the seam line and what line is the seam allowance line. After doing that, I went ahead to add grain line annotations and cut out my back dress pattern in the same way I drew in the hemline, where I folded up the bottom of the paper and drew in the corners correctly. I did the same for the back as well. The final piece of pattern I'm going to be working on is the sleeve, and I'm just measuring my basic sleeve pattern, checking the bicep and the length to be sure of how much I need to shrink it by. So I'm reducing it by 1/2 inch along the sides and along the top edge, because the pattern has seam allowance included. So once I have the 1/2 inch taken out, I'm going to lose another 1/2 inch when I stitch the piece, so I know I have enough negative ease in the pattern. Once I was done doing that, I'm going ahead to just trim down the lines I just drew earlier on, so the pattern is all done, ready to be used. Don't forget to transfer important notches indicating what side is the front and the back of your sleeve as well. If you aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure to do so you catch the next tutorial where I show you how I use these patterns to cut onto my fabric and stitch and assemble everything together. So I have my front patterns done, which is a simple panel on the left and the really slashed one on the right. I also have my back, which looks like a 1 shoulder dress, but that sits on the back of the piece, and then my simple sleeve pattern. So make sure and keep your eyes out for the second tutorial coming up next on the channel, where I show you how to use all these patterns to stitch and sew the dress. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're excited for the next video, drop red heart emojis in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in my next one. Until then, have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.